Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. Hey, welcome to How to Exit, and we're going to talk today with Joel Ankney. Did I get that right, Joel? Joel
Almost,
Ankney.
man. I know
Almost, man.
it's like your ankle and your knee, knee.
All right. So I was telling him I'm not really great with this. Sometimes I get names wrong. So if I butcher it, he gets to call me out and get it right. Because we want you guys to know who he is, and towards the end, we're going to figure out how to make sure he tells you how to get a hold of him too. So Joel here is both an attorney, and he helps in the acquisitions and mergers space, commercial real estate and intellectual property. But he's also the author of two books that caught my eye when he reached out and said hi. And one of them is about. It says, "What's the words exactly? What your attorney should,
Yeah,
what you should know from your attorney if you're going to buy a
yeah.
small
I mean,
business, right?"
I even have a visual aid,
There
so
you go.
there's a copy of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's called "Here's the Deal: Everything You Wish a Lawyer Would Tell You About Buying a Small Business." So
Right. So you know, I'm probably into this now for about 12 months. I've acquired a couple small things,
okay,
and I learned some lessons after I
yes,
turned the first one over to attorney, and I was like, oh, wow, now I have a checklist, right? So we'll definitely
yeah,
get into that. Where I always like to start is I want people to kind of get to know who you are and get to know you. And the question I like to ask is start anywhere you're comfortable, but tell us about kind of who you are, where you're from, what you stand for, and what really kind of gets you going.
yeah. That's okay. Where I'm from, I grew up in the Washington D.C. area. Um, went to college out in Utah, went to law school at William and Mary in Virginia, and have stayed in Virginia since then. Practiced law with some very large law firms for about 11 years, 12 years, and then started my own practice about 18 years ago. And I'm just by myself. And I just focus on doing deals for people. So I do lots of small business merger and acquisition work. I do a lot of commercial real estate work. A lot of times that commercial real estate work is kind of related to or associated with the M&A work. And then I just advise people on lots of operational issues like contracts that they're going to enter into with vendors or consultants or things like that. So that's where I spend most of my time. I don't go to court. That was actually a goal of mine when I decided to go to law school. Was I wanted to be a transactional attorney. I didn't want to be a trial attorney, and it's worked out really well for me. What gets me going is my kids. I have four sons. Their ages between 18 and 30 years old. So we love to do things outdoors and be active and sports and just be together. And so that's really kind of my why. That's why I do what I do and what gets me going. I've done some volunteer work in the past. I actually really enjoy working with teenagers and exposing them to um, maybe that's not the right word, but but introducing them to outdoor activities like mountain biking or skateboarding, things that we love to, or being on the river. I like to canoe as well and kayak. So those kinds of things. I love kind of being outdoors and being with a group of people who perhaps have not done it before, but who, as they go through the experience, it kind of broadens their horizons, maybe inspires them to take up a new hobby or something like that, and maybe inspires them to face some other challenges in their lives as well. So that's kind of who I am, I think, in a nutshell.
It's really cool. So I have just because we're still getting to know each other too,
Yeah,
right? I have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we love to go outside. We like to go fishing, or if it's
yeah.
some days we just go out and take the hammocks out to the lake, set them up, and they swim and splash. Because
Oh
splash
yeah.
in the lake, I live about 2 miles, 3 miles from the lake, probably about 5 or 6 miles from where we actually go to hang out at the water.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we love the outdoors, and I get it. I'm a little old to have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, but I got started late in life.
It's. I think it's all good. You're as young as you feel, I think. And
Right.
I mean,
I'm only
I'm going to be 57 this year, and I still go skateboarding a couple times a week with my 18-year-old son. So, um,
so.
it's always the oldest guy at the skate park.
So
So,
that's fun. I actually skated as a teen, but I don't think I've been on a skateboard since my 20s. Kind of somewhere along the way, I think I broke my ankle one too many times
oh,
and sold it off or something. I don't know. But no, I used to. The first time I ever tried to jump in off a half pipe, I actually broke my ankle really bad, and I was
yikes.
young, so I just duct taped it up real good. And Mom came and got me, and she's like, "What's all the duct tape around your shoes there?" And I was like, "Well, I twisted my ankle. I'd broke it in like 4 places and
Oh
was
my
skating for
gosh.
2 hours on it." So yeah,
Yeah.
little Henri as a kid. So cool. Let's jump right into the acquisitions and mergers world and
Yeah.
stuff. I love the title of your book. So how about some insight? What are the things, just off the top of your head? What are some things that we should know before we get into buying or selling a small business?
I think that's a wonderful question, and that's really one of the main reasons why I wrote the book was because a lot of the people that I'm dealing with, it's their first time having a merger and acquisition experience, either their first time buying a small business or their first time selling a small business. And a lot of people I've come to see over the years have felt like perhaps it's just an event. Like they agree in principle, the buyer and the seller, and then they're just like, okay, let's just close it. What's the big deal? But it really is a process. And I wanted to have a book that I could give people that kind of explains the process. I can't ever say that I can speak completely in layman's terms, but I try and be as clear as a lawyer can be, perhaps, to help explain that process and some of the major issues that people will encounter during, in the process. So I think that, one of the things that people are surprised at is how many pieces there are to the puzzle. And I want people to know what all the pieces are and how they're going to get put together, because it does take time to put the puzzle together, to put the deal together. Um, Go ahead.
And a lot of the stuff I think you'll uncover through that probably should have been knowledge to that buyer or seller before the negotiations process, right? A lot of the guys, if you
Yeah.
haven't had training, like before I had training, I just jumped in and like, what's the price? And I try to figure it out on a napkin and did some googling. And okay, that sounds good. Let's close this thing. And
Right.
then I went to a guy like you, and you're like, whoa, have you done due diligence? If they're LLCs in good standings, have you seen their articles of incorporation? Have you seen their corporate minutes? I was like, nah, you do that stuff, right? Then I learned, then I went and
Mhm.
actually I went and got trained by some guys and got a checklist, and we do a lot of that stuff before, it has to beat my criteria before I'd ever toss it over to a trained professional like yourself, because I know
Yeah.
the basics to look for, right?
Right.
So I can get that. What's one I always like to ask this question. What's one myth or one thing that's out there in the industry you wish just didn't exist, right? A common in the buying and selling of business, there's a lot of stuff that's out there.
Well, I'm a little biased, but I think one of the myths is that the lawyers are going to screw the deal up. Now, that's not to say that there aren't that doesn't happen, and I want to try and be real polite to my colleagues, but I've been doing M&A deals for almost 30 years now,
Right.
and but I do know that there are a lot of attorneys who think that doing an M&A deal for a small business is like is not a big deal. It's easy. They think it's easy. And so you'll have lawyers who aren't experienced in the M&A setting take on a deal. And I'll be very candid. A lot of trial attorneys do deals, and that, it's if they don't understand the process and they don't understand how to prioritize the issues and to filter out things that really aren't that big of a deal, and then bring the most significant things to the top and resolve those things, then they can kind of get in the way of the deal. And so, but the overall myth is, if you find, that I mean, if you do find an attorney who has the experience, they're not going to screw the deal up for you. They should be able to help you with the deal, help you through the deal.
And
So
I can see that, and I laugh because both the mentors I've been trained under so far will tell you to bring the attorney in last because attorneys kill brokers and attorneys kill deals.
yeah,
I mean, they just beat that into train. And one of them is actually an attorney. Roland Fraser's an attorney, and I'm not going to quote him or anything, but I'm pretty sure even he said that in the stage of things, the attorney comes in like once you know you're going to do this thing, right?
right,
And
right,
and you've already done all your due diligence, but I can see that too. I mean, inside of the negotiation, you know, the second one of us brings an attorney to the table, the other one feels a need to have one also.
oh sure,
So there's, in my process, I wouldn't bring the attorney in until I know this is a done deal, and now I need all the due diligence done. I need to see if there's any gotchas, but I make sure that the seller's aware too,
yeah,
right? The seller's aware that okay, I'm going to have an attorney review. This is due diligence phase. I'm going to have the attorney, look through this with a fine tooth comb. Is there anything I should know that he's going to find? Because he's going to look closer than I did, and
right,
this is part of the closing process, and I educate them in that so it doesn't kill the deal. But I've had more than one attorney, like, oh, this is a horrible deal. And I was like, yeah, maybe for you, but I kind of know what I'm doing with this, and it's a part of a bigger puzzle.
right,
And then, it's like, unless you're an mergers and acquisitions guy and you're, a financial advisor, please quit giving me the advice that it's a bad deal. I don't want to hear that.
right,
Right now, if you told me like one of them, there's a legal issue that they can't transfer. There were shares owned by somebody that they didn't
yeah,
disclose until they gave the paperwork over. Now that's another story, right?
right,
There's a real roadblock there, or you call it not a roadblock, but a hump we got to get over. So
right. Well, I think you bring out two really important things. One is a question that I get asked all the time: is when do you bring the attorney into the deal? What's the right timing? And I still search for an answer, a real specific answer to that question. But in some instances, bringing me in toward the end of the deal is just perfectly fine. But in other instances, it might be good to at least have me involved in a limited role toward the front end of the deal. And I'll give you a quick example. I had a person that I had been working on. We had probably worked on 5 potential acquisitions. The first 4 fell through at various stages, but probably on the second deal, we got to the letter of intent stage, and I drafted the letter of intent. And anyway, by the time we got to the 5th deal, they had decided that because I had already drafted one letter of intent, they didn't need me to draft another one. So they just used the one from the second deal and changed a few things and you know what? I don't have a problem too much with that, but I wish they had had me look at it for 5 minutes before they sent it out because they missed some stuff and they left in some stuff that didn't apply to the 5th deal. So in the end, it didn't really matter because they came to me and I drafted the purchase agreement and I got the things in there that needed to be in there. And what do I mean by that? I mean the second deal was a hard asset deal, for lack of for the easy way to describe it. And the 5th deal was a completely online business, so lots of intangible assets, copyrights, trademarks, domain names, things that needed to be transferred in a certain way, but they weren't addressed in the letter of intent at all. So, but we got them into the purchase agreement, and everything was
right.
fine. So, I think but it is it's a difficult question sometimes. What's the right timing? I kind of sometimes I tell people, well, if you feel like you can't sleep at night, maybe you ought to call the lawyer and ask him or her a question or two, let them look at a few things, kind of get them involved. But because when you start to take those risks on, and it's really more on the buyer side than on the seller side. Seller side is a lot easier from a legal perspective.
My answer, I get that question too, and my answer is always is that 2 things. First one is the second, the answer is to when you bring an attorney in. The second the other party has an attorney, you probably should have one,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
Attorneys communicate better with attorneys. It's just natural, and it stops some of the weirdness that can happen if one side has an attorney and the other one's trying to wing it. And
Yes.
the second answer to the question is how many deals have you done? right? Because if you've done a bunch and you've done this process, you know what your attorney is going to ask, and bringing them on later is probably going to save you a few hours. But if you haven't, then it's all based on skill set, right? I have a
Yeah.
checklist. I know what I need to see. I know that a lot of them are going to be no's before on my side
Right.
before we get to the point where an attorney needs to draw up anything. And I'm comfortable with the draft of the letter of intent, drafting it up, thinking what I have, but I like to
Mhm.
have it reviewed. So I put in
Yeah.
everything I think, I've had in others that applies to this, and then I have a professional review it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that you're kind of implying, which I think that I want to bring to the front, is that part of your role as the client is to help manage the deal, and part of managing the deal is managing the professionals, the lawyer, and if you involve a CPA, a business valuation company, things like that. And so the more you know about how to work with those people, the better, because I like to feel like I'm on your team. I don't want to be, I don't want to be necessarily the star point guard or something like that. I just want to be, I'm on your team. I want you to feel comfortable talking to me. I want you to feel like you can, use me as much or as little as you want, and that you're not going to get, kind of billed to death on things. And so listening to your experience helps me understand that you have already kind of decided on, you've worked with enough lawyers, you've worked on enough deals, but the person who's going to do it for the first time is that's all. It's a little harder to answer that question for them because um, they don't have that experience managing a lawyer. So
My favorite question is, if you have to ask me, you should probably call your attorney,
yeah.
right? Because once you get to a certain comfort level, you wouldn't be asking a guy like me a question like that, right? You just
Right.
wouldn't. So
I think lawyers are like shoes too, right? You got to find the right fit. You don't want to, for lack of a better analogy, you don't want to buy a Gucci loafer when all you need is a flip flop or something like that. I shouldn't say that's too extreme, but I mean, lawyers come in different shapes and sizes, and what I mean by that is not their physical appearance, but their experience, the industries that they've worked with, the size of law firm that they're in, their billable hour rate, things like that. And so, um, I hate to, I've got a deal in right now that's I almost hesitate even taking because the purchase price is only like $60,000, but I still have to do the same amount of work. And so, we talk about fees and things like that, but they don't need, for example, if they had gone to a 500 attorney law firm for that kind of a deal, that wouldn't be a good fit. No, not at all. I'm a much better fit, but likewise, I had a client that I helped start up and have worked with them operationally for 25 years. And last year they came to me and they said, we've got an offer to sell. It's going to be a approximately $30 million purchase price. We need to close in 3 weeks. And everything that's going to be transferred essentially are government contracts. And I said, yeah, you need to hire a different law firm for that. Someone who has got all that experience with the transferring government contracts and who can put 5 to 10 lawyers on this so that you can do all the due diligence and close the deal within that time frame. And they did it. They found a firm that was able to get through all that, and they closed in 3 weeks, which is pretty amazing to me.
that
But
is impressive.
yeah,
The due
so
diligence process alone is, in my world, takes that long,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so if you look at the overall, like, the flow of a deal, what areas do you think that, an entrepreneur or somebody looking to become an entrepreneur, buy a business, they should probably never go alone? I know of some that I think of, like the financials. If you haven't read a bunch of financials, you should probably have a CPA take a second look at those.
I agree.
Maybe I have a forensic CPA on staff that, helps me pull stuff apart and put it back together when I need her,
Mhm.
right? So, you know, what other areas, as an attorney, what other areas along the deal, like, man, you really should have a professional look at, X.
I think I mean, certainly a CPA a lawyer, and then depending on the industry, you might need some subject matter experts. Um, so, for example, if you're going to buy a convenience store that has gas pumps out in front of it, you're definitely want to have an environmental engineer come in and do at least a phase one environmental site assessment, because there's a large risk there when you buy, even if you do an asset deal. When you buy that convenience store, you're going to become the successor to the environmental liabilities on the property. The asset deal is not going to shield you from that just because of the way the laws are written. Again, subject matter experts, if you're in certain types of industries. And, of course, if you're going to finance the deal with a commercial bank, then you want to have a loan officer who's in the deal toward the beginning so that you can help understand what kind of money is going to be available to you and how, you want to get them comfortable with the deal sooner rather than later as
Right.
well.
Yeah, the environmental thing you touched on was something that kind of popped up earlier this year. I had a connection, a friend who is in California buying a manufacturing plant that
Mm-hmm.
does welding, and they use liquid chemicals on the welding process,
Oh, yeah.
and they had to do an EPA study on the runoff and stuff on the ground, and that place was bad. Now he's looking like, how does he mitigate the environmental liability of, like, I guess they actually do core samples and stuff. I don't know if all
Mm.
states do this, but they do this phase study where they took core samples of the ground, took it to the lab, and I guess the shop has been spraying the floors down for a while
Oh,
out
no.
under the lawn. I don't know what was going on, but he's kind of like, what do you do about that?
Well,
Yeah,
the short answer is find a different deal. I mean, that's, I spent the first 3 years of my career as an environmental lawyer, representing mostly like large companies, Fortune 500 companies, and helping them with compliance issues. And so we were looking at large manufacturing facilities, doing a lot of auditing and things like that. But it is scary if you get, from my perspective, if you have to go to a phase two, in other words, you do the phase one site assessment and the environmental consultant says, hey, this property appears to be so dirty that we need to take core samples and send them to a lab. In a small M&A deal, you're probably at a threshold where you seriously want to think about looking for a different deal, because it's almost, I don't want to say it's impossible to mitigate those liabilities, but it's very difficult. And there are creative ways to do it. So, for example, if you can convince the seller to put a significant portion of the purchase price in escrow, so that if you do have to do some cleanup, within a year or two after you close, or you have to close some underground storage tanks or above ground storage tanks or things like that, and you that money sits in the escrow so you can draw down on it to reimburse yourself. I mean, that's a creative way to do it, but most sellers in small M&A deals aren't going to be real happy about tying up their purchase price. I just closed out an escrow that was an 18-month post-closing escrow. Unfortunately, there were no drawdowns on the escrow, but I was representing the seller. But he was happy. Obviously, he didn't want to tie his money up for 18 months, but we got it all back, so that worked out. But other than that, a lot of people will say, well, in the purchase agreement, we'll have indemnification. We'll have some really strong indemnification language, and that's a necessary part of the purchase agreement. But the indemnity is only as strong as the financial resources of the seller. So if the seller, for example, is selling the business so that they can retire, or they're going to sell the business and then distribute the purchase price out to pay a lot of loans off. In other words, if at the end of the day, the seller's really not going to have any money, excuse me, after closing, then your indemnity doesn't have a lot of strength. And so I mean, again, yes, the indemnity should be there, but you can't really rely on it unless the seller is going to stick around for a long time and has a lot of financial resources that you can get to. There may be some creative insurance products out there. I just don't. That's an area I don't know too much about. But there aren't a lot of ways to move. That's why I say it's probably better to focus your creative energy on finding a different deal.
That's exactly what I told him. I was like, number one, it's California. Number two,
Oh yeah,
they're already doing core samples. You're not getting away from that. If you've
right.
ever seen what they do to to mediate that, they pull the soil off and haul it off or whatever,
Yeah.
it could be very expensive, right?
Oh
You could
yeah,
have to
absolutely.
dig a giant hole and turn around and fill it back in or something. So yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. So we're talking about real estate a little bit. One of the things that I've noticed in the two different groups I'm with, as far as the you know acquisitions or mergers group, was there wasn't anybody there. Both gurus actually teach us a sell and leaseback strategy as part of the way to finance part of the deal,
Hmm.
but there was no built-in group of people who would do that. So I went out. I've got a real estate background. That's my background. It's
Okay.
residential mostly, but I used to own the local RIA and some other stuff, so I know all the investors in town. So I build teams is what I do. So I built a team. And we do the sell leaseback part of acquisitions and mergers. So, say right now we have one that's supposed to close in a few weeks. That's a bunch of dental offices on the West Coast, and the the seller own the property, and the buyer bought it all, and now needs to pay the seller down some of the money that's on the payment. So he doesn't need to own the real estate. So he sells it to these uh, mergers and acquisitions, or sorry, sells it to these P&E firms and real estate investment trusts, and then leases it back for 15 years. Have you seen that done? Is that some of the stuff that you would look at as far as part of the creative structure of deals?
Well, to answer the questions in reverse order, I certainly could do deals like that, but I
Mhm.
no, I haven't really seen that done here. Most of my real estate work is, for example, you talk about a collection of dental offices. I may help a dentist. In fact, I'm working with a dentist right now who sold his practice and now is selling his uh, dental office. The real estate is sitting empty right now, but he's selling it to another dentist. So my transactions are typically on the um, uh, the one building at a time kind of. Now, I did do a deal a couple of years ago, and I think this is a little bit more common for me, not exactly what you're talking about, but where my client sells the business but holds on to the real estate and leases the real estate to the buyer, and then gives in this particular instance, the last one I did, we gave the buyer an option to buy the real estate, which they exercised about a year or two after closing. That helped them figure out how much the business was going to cash flow, and whether they could, service debt to buy the real estate. And so it worked out. And to me, that's more typical for what I see. And
And
you
I'm a
never
fan of
asked, yeah, you never asked me where I am, and I never said, but
it.
I am in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and so there are kind of local practices as well. And I don't know if it's different elsewhere, but that's typically a lot of what I see around here.
So this is okay. So we're the guys I'm circling with. We don't go out after the software as a service and the dot coms and the
Mhm.
all that type of stuff at companies. Those are very competitive. There's nothing wrong with being in that space. It's just we kind of go after the boring companies, the mom and pop. Like I own a pest control company, a real estate company, those type of things, and they just turn out. You put money in, they pull out money,
Yeah.
but you know inside of the that world, a lot of times when the owner's ready to retire, they're ready to retire. So they're like, we'll sell you the business and the real estate. And what
Mhm.
I do is facilitate the sale of that real estate to an institution that'll lease it back to them. And if and they, like dental offices, medical offices are real big because they have a great um, a very very low default rate. So I think it's something like 98% success rate leasing
Yeah.
to to medical practitioners. So most of the real estate investment trusts and stuff will buy anything medical, dental, that type of stuff. So
Right. Right.
Cool. So, looking here at the questions I like to ask, um, what's the biggest area around, mergers and acquisitions and stuff that you enjoy? Like, what are you curious about inside of the space? You've written books on it, so
Mhm.
what areas are you most interested in?
I like to, I guess, see other people's light bulbs come on, and I like to, I'm doing a deal before I got on with you today. I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with one of my clients who is, we're selling off an interest in a company, and we're trying to come up with a creative way to do it, and we bounced ideas off of each other, and eventually, I came up with two ideas and that we hadn't thought of before. But I love that kind of that intellectual exercise of working with my clients, bouncing ideas off of each other, and trying to figure out a way to help them accomplish their objectives. Yeah, I mean, it's from what I like about the M&A space is sometimes I tell people a big role of me as a lawyer is to be a project manager. And I love to have my checklist of 70 to 100 items and to kind of put all those pieces of the puzzle together in the time, at the time they need to be put together so that we walk into closing and we're ready to go. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the big draw to me is to help people, achieve those objectives. I like to think that I'm helping people. That's one reason I like to do the M&A work is because even though there may be some opposition in the negotiation, everybody's really trying to work toward the same goal. We're trying to put a deal together because the seller wants it and the buyer wants it, and and there may be some obstacles, but I like to see if we can come up with creative ways to come over, get over those obstacles. But yeah, in the end, when we walk away from closing and everybody is kind of jazzed or juiced up to sellers happy to move on, buyers excited to get in, I think that's a great day.
It's interesting because that's one of the things that when you reached out on LinkedIn, I looked at your profile, looked at your website, and it's like, wow, this guy's really customer focused. You even mentioned inside of your LinkedIn profile enjoying seeing your customers achieve goals they
Oh
hit.
yeah, yeah,
So that's one of the things that like, man, I think I do want to talk to this guy, and I'd already we had interviewed an attorney like one or two. Podcasts ago, but you're different enough. I was like, this is going to be fun. So I enjoy it. Thank you for being here. And we got a couple more questions here.
yeah,
So one of
sure.
my favorite things to ask is I've asked you a few questions. We've had a few conversations. One of the favorite things I like to ask is what should I be asking you? All right, as both of us in the mergers and
Yeah.
acquisitions world, what should we be talking about so that the listeners who may be either buying or selling a business, they get the most value.
Yeah, I think the three things that I want my clients to ask me, and if they don't ask me, I'll bring it up. I want them to ask me, what are the biggest issues I should be looking out for in my deal? The second thing I want them to ask me is, how long is it going to take? And the third thing is, how much is it going to cost me? What are your fees going to be? And maybe what should I expect as far as other costs and expenses that I'm going to incur? I think if you're armed with those, especially if you're on the buyer side, if you're armed with those answers to those three questions, I think you'll feel a lot better about, as the deal progresses through the process, that things, you won't be as stressed. You'll kind of be like, okay, this is normal. I knew we were going to encounter these things, and it's okay. This is the way it's commonly going to go. So those are my kind of my big three.
So the answer to those three questions that change deal per deal or industry per industry, or there's some pretty solid. This is I'm always going to answer at
Yeah.
least this part.
I think that the first question about what are the significant issues are going to be driven by industry. Now there are going to be certain issues that are going to be the same in every industry, but like we were talking before, if you're buying a convenience store, they're going to be environmental may all of a sudden be a big issue. If you're buying an online fulfillment business, then environmental is not going to be an issue at all. But what might be an issue in an online business is making sure I get ownership of all of the intangible stuff, the intellectual property stuff. And so that's second. How long is it going to take? I can tell you pretty much by asking you 3 or 4 questions, like who's the attorney on the other side, what's the purchase price, is there a lease involved or multiple leases involved that have to be transferred, and is there commercial financing involved? If I know the answers to those 4 questions, then I can tell you, okay, it's not going to close in 2 weeks, right? If there's a lender involved and there's a landlord involved, those are usually the 2 biggest obstacles that slow things down. Getting the lender to either give a new lease or to agree to to transfer the existing lease, and working through the loan process. They take a lot of time, and so your closing might be 2 or 3 months down the line, and that's good. That's fast, actually. And again, knowing who the lawyers are on the other side, if you tell me that your buyer is a P&E firm out of New York City and they're going to have a large New York law firm involved, it's going to take more time and it's going to cost more money because they're going to lawyer the thing to death, frankly.
Right.
And then fees from a lawyer's perspective, I've done enough deals that if you can tell me the answers to those other questions, who the lawyers are, what the purchase price is, I can give you a pretty good idea of what my fees are going to be. So.
Right. It's like, I think a lot of it has to do with the deal, right? The difference
Yeah.
between like buying the pest control company, which was a micro purchase. I bought it before I got mentored. So the number one rule the mentors teach us now is don't buy another job. That one is definitely another job. But and then all right, now I've got a team of like 8 or 9 of us that are doing an international roll up of marketing firms. We're buying marketing firms from all over the world,
Okay.
and we've recruited some very top industry talent to like top of the top in the marketing space. I don't know if I have the permission to say their names quite yet because they just
That's
said yes
okay,
the
but
last couple of
that
weeks.
sounds really exciting. Yeah.
So that's fun, and our goal is we're already talking to family offices. We're already talking to the P&E firms, and I think maybe a SPAC, the special acquisitions, the SPAC company, and because we want to build what they want to buy, right? So we're starting with the end in mind and talking to them like, hey, we're building this thing. Tell us what you want,
Mhm.
so that as we build this out, we make sure we address those issues, and you get to we'll custom build something for you, pretty much. We're gonna get those answers from 3 or 4 people and build what aligns across all of them. But I can imagine the difference between the attorney when we go to close that, especially if
Oh yeah.
our target right now is a $500 million exit, right?
Yes.
So and the guy we just got approved last week, um, he's in the Marketing Hall of Fame. The last one he just did, they acquired over 200 marketing firms,
Hmm.
and they created one of the top 20 or top 50 marketing firms on the planet by doing so.
Wow.
So we got a rock star, that's helping us out. So I
Yeah.
don't think we're having a problem doing this at all, right?
Yeah.
But and we've got 4 under LOI already. So 3 on the other side of the pond in Europe, in different places, and
Wow.
1 here
That's
so
cool.
far.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
But yeah, so I mean, I could get it. You're saying the difference is like, what is their attorney on? I don't know what our attorney side is going to look like until we see who we're selling it to, and,
Mhm.
and the team they put together, because that's going to kind of dictate like what we need on this side, and how many hands are going to be in there. We had an attorney set some of the stuff up. I don't know if you've ever read the book. What is it? I've got it here on my desk, so I don't butcher the name, but it's slicing pie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Moyer,
So
I think the author's
yeah,
name is. Yeah.
yeah. So we actually went and got one of his attorneys that he recommended, because we're the
Great.
whole state, the whole our side of the acquisition is structured with the slicing pie model,
Gotcha.
right? So that we all have to work for our piece, including that's how we got these huge rock stars on. We just gave them a little bit higher multiple, or we're working that out right now. But
Yeah.
they work so many hours, they get so many slices of shares of the business, and so. I don't know if you've ever set up a deal with Mike Warrior, or actually, or one of his attorneys, since you
Yeah.
know who he is. But we went out and that's who we set up our LLC with. That's a totally different attorney probably than when we go to sell it,
Right.
right?
Right.
I need somebody that can interpret, a P&E firm's, legalese when it comes across the table,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I can. totally align with, the attorney's team depends on who's on the other side, right?
Mhm.
So in my real estate business, on the attorney that I use for that, I went out and found out, like, I talked to 2 or 3 attorney friends of mine. I have a friend who's in law school and stuff, like who is everybody in town afraid of? And like, they don't lose cases. Everybody doesn't know, if they see that name on there, they're not going to want to mess with,
Right.
not want to mess with them. And then I went out and put them on retainer for my business, and for a little bitty problem I had, and now you're my attorney of record. Anything pops up, I was like, I just talk to those guys, and a lot of stuff just goes away because I just don't want
Yeah.
to mess with them. I
Yeah.
won't say
No,
who it is here, but anyway, it's
that's okay. No,
you
I
know,
have guys like that locally that I
yeah.
refer. If I have a client who has a problem, then yeah, absolutely have 2 or 3 guys like that. And they likewise, if they, if somebody approaches them and says, we've got this little thing, that a lot of times they'll send it over to me and say, Joel, see if you can negotiate a resolution to this. And if you can't, then kick it back to us and we'll get the big guns out. So, yeah.
This was I did this because, the funny thing was, on that, the reason I got that firm involved originally was the attorney that was servicing, or what you call it, contracted to us or whatever. He's a sitting politician,
Oh,
and the guy that we were having a problem with had threatened the previous attorney, and like, the attorney called me and said, "Is this guy really dangerous? He's threatening me and my family." I was like,
oh my
if you,
gosh.
so I hired a sitting politician as an attorney, because if you threaten a sitting politician, the Department of Homeland Security will get involved. So I
That's
was kind
great.
of setting this guy, like, go ahead and
Yeah.
threaten our guy. Let's see what happens here, right? But I get that. I mean, I that is 100% accurate. And we have to click, right? Like, you and I think we're getting along really good now. If I've got a project, I'm gonna reach out to you and, give you a shot at it, just because I think we can communicate. That's more important to me than, like, whether you went to Ivy League or, Little League. I don't care, right?
Yeah.
What I care is that we can communicate. You have the credentials we need, and you're thorough, right? And I think that's, very evident that you have a passion for it. Another thing is, I always tell people, and you probably agree, is don't ever never hire an attorney that tells you he hates to go to court, and go on trial, if you think you're going to end up in court on trial,
Right. Right.
right? There's a real estate attorney in town. He'll tell you over and again, I hate being, I don't want to go to court. I don't. But people
Yeah.
still hire him, for things that has to go to, the eviction court, and has to go through,
Hmm.
some, foreclosures and stuff. I was like, I can't do it. If you tell me you hate doing something, you can't be good at
No, and
it.
that's, I mean, I have certainly been to court in my career. A lot of times because I'll have a client who will say to me, we've done so much work together and you know my
Mhm.
business so well, I don't want to refer it out. And if I lose, but frankly, I've won most of the times I've gone to court. I just don't like it that much. But I think it's, to me, court is in most instances an inefficient way to resolve a conflict. And it many times comes down to gamesmanship and economics, right? If you have more money to pay your lawyer to do more lawyer stuff, then you might be able to squeeze or force the other person to settle with you. And so I see the importance of lawsuits because a lot of times they can be used as leverage to get a settlement done when somebody might not come to the table to try and negotiate a settlement at the beginning of the problem. But I'm not typically the guy. I have other colleagues in town that I refer those problems off to, and they do a great job at it. So,
That's the second question I always ask if somebody tells me they don't enjoy going to court, is like, okay, in the event you have to defend the
right,
contracts you created, who
right,
are you going to recommend
right,
that we do? Because I don't mind if it's not you. I just want to know who, do you have somebody, like,
yeah,
if this needs to be defended, I'm ironclad. I know I did it right, and I want you to go to this guy because he's going to be able to argue that in front of the judge,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
that's something important to me in that space. So we're about 40 minutes into
right,
this. Let's do the part where, like, how do people reach out to you? How do they get a hold of you?
yeah.
What's the best way if they want to learn more about who you are and what you're doing, and maybe need some help with some business acquisitions and merger stuff or commercial real estate?
Yeah, I mean, easy ways to reach me. I have a website, so it's just my name, joelankney.com. We'll get you to my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I respond pretty quickly to people. If you want my books, they're on Amazon. They're on Audible. If you want an audio book, I have a very distinctive last name, so it's not hard to find me. Typically, if you just Google my name, I'm going to be the only one who pops up. So
It's Ankney.
correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, cool. So, all right. So, is there, let me think real quick. Is there anything I missed? I mean, is there something we should have just covered in this time frame, or something you just like, you feel like, man, I wish we would have talked about?
I think that we have touched on a lot of issues, and they've been really good. And I think that one of the things that I see sometimes, and I think we've kind of danced around this issue, is that it's really good to do, as you're preparing to do an acquisition or a sale, that part of that preparation includes learning how to work with a lawyer, learning what the lawyer's role is, learning perhaps what you can get out of a lawyer, and what to expect when you work with a lawyer. I think that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is because I wanted people to feel prepared when they came in to talk to me. So
I appreciate what you do. I think there's the small to medium sized business. The reason I even got into this space out of real estate is I just see it's really underserved. There's just a lot of small to medium mom and
mhm,
pop, you know, 50 person, 100 person, basically anything under $25 million in revenue businesses that don't really have anywhere to go. There's just not a huge buyer pool for them,
mhm.
and they're wonderful businesses,
Oh yeah.
employing amazing people. I walked through a concrete plant around December. Unfortunately, they had a few issues that kept us from moving forward. Um, but I walked through there, and they were third generation, and the employees. Some of the employees, like my granddad, worked here.
Wow.
It's just that it's a small town, great company, and I hope when they get their some legal stuff and some other stuff done, I hope to see them back in front of me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so yeah, so I appreciate your time. The LinkedIn description will actually, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the description of it, so people can jump to you.
Okay. Great.
That'd be cool. And then I've got both titles of your book are already in the description. I'll see if I can't jump on Amazon or something and throw some links in there for that too. To
Oh,
make it easy,
thanks.
let's make it easy for people to
Yeah.
reach out to
Yeah.
you. I appreciate your time, and I think we'll end the stream now and wish everybody a great day.
Okay, Ron. Thanks for having me on.